What's going on YouTube? My name is CymenSniped and welcome to the channel. In today's video, we're going to dabble into something a little bit more advanced compared to the other video that I made for team building. So you might want to get comfortable before we begin. To try to make this video as relevant to as many people as I can, I have segmented it into players of various stages of the game. They are basically known as the beginners, the mid gamers, and obviously the late gamers. The only difference between them is that the amount of time they spend playing the game and how far they have actually progressed. Assuming you have average luck and have been playing the game without letting the outpost defense cap at all, I'd say a beginner should probably be around level 50 and below, level 100 and below for the mid gamers, and for the late gamers, level 100 and above. Depending on when you're watching this video, the level range for the three different categories might be a little bit different. So you'll have to adjust where you consider yourself to be when you watch this video. Another thing to note is that if at any point in this video you are confused about the basic mechanics or what I'm talking about, there's a high chance that I have actually explained it in my previous team building video. So if you'd like to watch that first, I will leave it in the link right over here at the top right corner of the screen. And if let's say you would like to do it a little bit later, I'll also leave the link in the description below. While I'm talking about how to team build for different types of players, I'll be explaining about the overarching mindset that you should have and what you should be focusing on. I might also throw in some examples along the way to make it easier to understand, but some parts are very straightforward, so you probably can catch most of the things I'm trying to say. Now that I got all the disclaimers out of the way, let us begin with the first category of players, the beginners. The first thing I like to talk about is your basic team composition. If you have just started the game or decided to just wing it with what you have, you need to first understand the basic mechanics of a team. A full team of Nikkes consists of 5 units, and to make sure each and every one of them can unleash their maximum potential, you'll need to include all 3 different types of bursts in the team as well. Assuming you've already done that, you'll also need to arrange them in a way that allows them to cycle through their burst skills without needing to wait for cooldowns on full auto mode. Now, the reason you want to do this is because most of the burst 1 and 2 Nikkes have different cooldowns. Some have 20 seconds and some have 40 seconds. In auto mode, the game will always probe the leftmost Nikke of the same burst level and activates that skill first. Only if the leftmost Nikke of the same burst category is off cooldown will the auto mode actually trigger the next Nikke of the same burst category. A little bit confusing. Basically, what I just said was, if you have a burst 1 Nikke over here and your burst 1 Nikke over here, this is 20 seconds and this is 40 seconds. Yeah, the game will always cycle through and activate this burst skill and not this one, because whenever the game thinks it wants to trigger a burst 1 skill, this is always ready. You also need to make sure that among the 5 Nikkes in the team, you have at least 1 burst 1, 1 burst 2, and 1 burst 3. Obvious. In the event that you did not bring maybe a lower category burst, for example a burst 1 or burst 2, or during the battle, if your only burst 1 or 2 unit dies, your higher level burst skills will just be sitting there and not being able to activate throughout the entire game. The second thing I like to talk about is your weapon types. Sometimes you'll encounter stages where your usual team just cannot beat. However, the team you're already using is the best one you think you already have. So what can you do? The thing that you need to watch out for are basically the weapon types. Now, there is no one type of weapon that performs at peak performance on every type of stage. There will be times like interception level D where assault rifles, machine guns, and snipers are actually doing way better than the shotguns, SMGs, and rocket launchers. The reason why that happens is because of the effective range of these weapons, and some are better at close range while some are actually better in long range. Some excel at AoE damage while some excel at precision. To not go too deep into the details, the safest option of weapon to have are usually assault rifles, machine guns, and rocket launchers. They are generally great in most ranges and can clear waves of mobs quite easily as well. So if you do get stuck at certain stages and think that the problem isn't actually your CP levels, consider swapping in a lower CP or a weaker unit, but with the appropriate weapon type. Most of the time, it should work like a charm. And to wrap things up for the beginners, here's my recommendation team to start off at the very beginning. Now, rarity of the units aside, as long as you can fill in the slots with the conditions that I'm going to list you on the screen very soon, you should do just fine. For the sake of being as generally applicable to as many people as possible, I will try to avoid recommending the units that everyone rated incredibly high on every single tier list, but they're still the best in slot. However, I'm just not going to mention them, assuming most people actually don't have them, myself included. So what you can see on screen right now is basically what I call a team template. Now, I'm just going to share 3 with you. Of course, they're not the, if I don't follow, then I cannot play the game. It's just my personal recommendation, and it's also something a lot of people are talking about as well. The first template I'd like to share with you is what we call the 113 team. So what we mean by 113 is that you have a burst 1 unit, a burst 2 unit, and 3 burst 3 units for most of the cases. Now, what you want to do is you have to make sure that your burst 1 unit has 20-second cooldown, your burst 2 unit has 20-second cooldown. One of your burst 3 units is going to have an AoE for their ultimate skill, 1 single target, or an AoE skill, and the third burst 3 can be a flex slot. As for the weapon types, I highly recommend those with assault rifle, machine gun, and rocket launchers. Now, even if you don't have 3 and you're mixing in some shotguns, SMGs, and whatnot, it can still work, but depend on the stage. The second template I'd like to talk about is the 2-1-2. Basically, what you have is 2 burst 1 units, 1 burst 2 unit, and 2 burst 3. Now, the reason you usually want to do this is because you have 2 really good burst 1 units, one with 40-second cooldown and the other with 20 seconds. Your burst 2 unit must always only have 20-second cooldown, and you can have 2 burst 3 units, one does AoE and the other one does single target damage. Same weapon type recommendation, machine gun, assault rifle, rocket launchers are your best friends. Now, the third template I'm going to share with you is basically what I call the 1-2-2. You have 1 burst 1 unit, 2 burst 2 units, and 2 burst 3 units. Now, the reason you want to do this is also because there are certain burst 2 units that you have in your entire roster that you just want to use and offer you absolutely amazing buffs. So that's why you want to use 2 burst 2 units. But you need to make sure the same rule applies to the previous template, which is the 2-1-2, that your 2 burst 2 units must have one on 40-second cooldown and the other on 20-second cooldown. If not, the burst will not trigger, but there's an exception to this case as well. In the event that you use a second burst 2 or a second burst 1 unit, that you only want them to trigger their skill 1 and skill 2 and not their ultimate skills, you can still use them this way. Now, generally, the recommended units for burst 1 is N102, which is super common among all the players out there. The burst 2 units you can use is Anis and Berlotta. They're both absolutely amazing rocket launchers. And for burst 3s, well, I wouldn't really recommend Rappi at this point, assuming that she actually kills up all the time by taunting enemies when she triggers her ultimate skill. However, honestly speaking, any burst 3 DPS that is not rated as trash on the Pt.2 database pretty much will work for you for the beginning of the stages. Now, if you've gone past the point of the beginners, the next section is probably something that might help you. Now, for mid gamers, we can assume that you have already gotten a team going, and what I mentioned for the beginners, you have already done. So let's talk about what you should be considering when trying to improve your team during the mid game. Assuming you're aware of the synergy between your cooldowns of a basic team, you should now assess the quality of unit you have in your lineup. This is where I would recommend that you check a database, for example, the Pt.2, for more detailed information of the units you have. However, you should leave the review section out of the picture first, unless you have absolutely no idea what that unit does. Now, from a more general perspective, the main damage contributor in your team is almost always going to be your burst 3 unit. So in the mid game, you're very much likely to keep getting new units that allow you to experiment with various team comps to find what you like best. But because of that, you need to make sure of one very important thing, which brings us to the first tip for mid gamers: leveling up the right way. Now, I've already done a video on the basics of leveling your Nikke, so if you haven't watched it and you would like to do so, I will leave it in the top right corner of the screen right now. And if you'd like to do so after watching this video, I will also leave a description in, obviously, the description section below. Alright, now, with the synchro system, you are only needed to have 5 Nikkes. 5 Nikkes at the highest base level, which you will need 3 different resources to enhance. At the beginning of the game, it is very, very efficient, and it's very, very easy to achieve by using 5 SR units at 2 stars to be your top 5 level characters. However, the end goal is to have your best 5 SSR units that you always use. You have to take note of this. Remember this with a burning passion. The end goal is to have 5 of the SSR units that you always use to be at 3 stars and be your top 5 level units. So in the other team building video, I basically mentioned the very basics of it. However, I did not mention how are you going to transition from your 5 SR 2-star units to 5 SSR 3-star units. So let me explain in steps. So if you look at the entire progression of your 5 synchro characters, most of us will probably begin with stage A, which is listed on the screen right now. You will have 5 SR 2-star units. Now, as you slowly progress to the mid game, when you start getting SSR units, and if you're getting lucky, you might have 1 or 2 of them that has limit broken to 1 or 2 stars. So the next step you want to do is any SSR unit that you use has achieved to 2 stars. You can actually start to place them in your top 5 by resetting one of the 5 SR 2-star units to refund all the resources, and you transfer all of them into your SSR unit that is 2-star. So as you gradually work towards filling that roster, the top 5 up with your SSR units, your next step, which is in step C right now, will be having most of the SR 2 stars and SSR 3 stars in your entire 5-man roster at the very top. And ultimately, as you slowly switch in all your SSR 3-star units, you will end up with 5 of your SSR 3 stars as your top 5 level units. So the reason why you want to do this is because most of the time, the SSR unit that has the most stars at the earliest point in time based on your efforts, meaning to say units that you pull, spending your pity points on the extra body so that they can limit break, is your carry DPS. And it's always going to be the case, correct? Please just say correct. So the reason why I actually suggested this particular method to you and doing it in this way is really just because you do not want to reach level 160, for example, and you have to wait for all 5 units to achieve 160 before your carry DPS can be bumped up to 160 as well. So as you all know how the synchro mechanism works, is that any unit that you synchronize at the bottom area, not the top 5 units that you invested your resources into, if you synchronize a certain units, it will always follow the lowest level cap of the top 5. Meaning to say, even if you have a level 180 or 200 in your top 5, or 4 of them in fact, if let's say all 4 of the units are level 200, but one of them is level 120, everybody else that you synchronize will only be capped at 120. And you do not want to wait for every single unit to reach the same level before your carry DPS can enjoy the same level as well. So what you want to do is once your carry DPS has achieved 2 stars, it's all right to switch it in because number 1, the resources you trade off to reset a certain unit is only 10 gems. It's just 10 gems. Second reason is you can then invest all of your resources to make sure that your carry DPS is the very first unit to achieve the highest level before the other support units. Moving on to the next most important tip for mid gamers is resource farming priority. But at this point in time, you're probably very much done with team building. You already have a team running and you're just clearing stages. So your goal is to just clear more stages. By managing your resources a little bit more wisely, you can then reduce the amount of time you need to wait till you push past certain stages. To do that, you need to pay very close attention to how you manage and farm the 3 key resources you use to level up your Nikkes. The 2 main resources you'll be using and always be starved for in the early and the mid game are your credits and your battle data, basically your EXP, the blue ones. And usually your first gigantic wall you need to break through in terms of levels is usually 120, because at that point, every single Nikke to get past 120 to 121, you need 4.5k core dust, meaning to say if you want everybody else to synchronize together with you, you need 22.5 core dust in order to make that happen at level 120. Imagine 140 and 160, 180 and level 200. So when considering the rewards of events or, when you're clearing shops, you should focus on getting more of these to not stifle your progression. If you're more of a always be prepared sort of person, then you'll need to probably start preparing for core dust by slowing down on purchasing the battle data EXP and your credits unless you really need to. The third and final tip I have for you mid gamers is basically learn to synchronize your team's synergies. Now, Not all Nikke buffs have the same offensive stat or debuffs with the same effect. Some focus on reducing the enemy defense, while some actually buffs your attack. There's also the ones that basically buffs your crit chance and crit damage, but unless you have a choice, you should avoid these until they fix the crit mechanics in the future. The trick to do this is to stack as many Nikkes that provides the same type of buff or debuff in a team as a general rule of thumb. Once you've done that, you then need to know how to prioritize which one to level first. So skills in this game is actually very expensive in order to advance. Not only do all three skills use various types of the same currency, the burst ultimate requires even more to level up compared to the other two skills. But not all skills actually carry the same amount of weight in a fight. You need to consider the effect and the percentage that it does. In many cases, the skill effect may sound amazing, but the multiplier is so bad that there's just really no reason in actually having them. So the priority you should follow when it comes to picking the skills to level, you need to first focus on your DPS carry, and then your support, and lastly, there is no lastly, just focus on the first two above. For your DPS carry, you want to always try to level up their burst ultimate skill first, but if you do not have enough to level up your burst ultimate, focus on your skill 1 and skill 2 while saving for your ultimate skill, which comes next. Same applies to your support as well. Alright, so now we got the beginners and the mid gamers done and dusted. If you haven't liked the video or sub to the channel, now is the time to do it, because it really took a lot of work to actually make it to this point for me. Okay, now moving on to the late gamers. Now the biggest challenge for late gamers when it comes to progression is a little bit similar compared to the mid guys, but at this stage, where you always start for every small bit of EXP, your gears, quotas and other things that contribute to your CP. So in this section, I'm going to talk about 1. Your gears, 2. Common consoles, number 3. Nikke bonds. When we talk about late gamers, you have to understand that for people in this point of the game, you probably are pushing stages very slowly. Probably a few stages every few days. So the time you spend playing the game is very different compared to those who are just pushing content. So I'm going to share with you what I think you should do, assuming everything for the beginners and mid gamers are already done and capped for you. The first I'd like to talk about are your gears. Now, until you start farming for gears from daily interception as stage 6 and above, you'll be changing them as frequently as the girlfriend that you never had. That's supposed to be very frequent, by the way. But anyway, when you're able to start clearing interception as stage 6, you'll be able to occasionally get tier 7 gears, which are very close to the top tier endgame ones right now. These babies give you so much stat that it makes the older gears look like an expired life insurance. If you've played the game this long, you'll also already realize that the helm and the gloves basically give you the most attack, so they are your priority for advancement. Now, even though I say so, you shouldn't be stingy to enhance them to level 4 early on, even if they aren't your best slot. For those who didn't know, all gear pieces not only have rarity difference, but also types as well. Some gears are specifically for a faction, which obviously gives them more stats when equipped on them. To get to interception 6, however, other than getting as high a CP as you can, the most general team comp to use are shotgun users and AoE burst types, although there are other methods on the internet that teaches you how to fiddle with your emulator and etc. to cheese the boss. Assuming you only play on your phone, having shotgun users, even if it's just 1 or 2 of them in the team, will greatly help in cancelling the boss's big skill right after you trigger your burst 3 ultimate. Shotgun users like Sugar, Isabel, Drake are all amazing in this fight. The next thing I want to talk about are your common consoles. Now, if you're watching this video soon after its release, we've only ever had 2 events that give us a huge influx of these so far, but there's basically 2 types of common consoles: the class type and the faction type. The class type increases your HP and defense across the board permanently for all who belong to the same class, such as an attacker, while the faction type does the same, but for attack and defense. And the reason why I would like to actually say that this is the second thing you should focus on as a late gamer is because the advancement and the stats that was given to you, and it's because the common consoles actually give you stats across the board compared to a single Nikke. That also means that the more of a Nikke type you have in a team, the more CP this particular thing actually adds and gives to you. So far, the only place you can get them are from the events, so whenever you get the chance, be sure to clear them out from the shop or mission rewards. Prioritize the faction type over the class type just because there's just more weight in attack and defense. And the last thing I would like to talk about for you late gamers are basically your Nikke bonds. The bond system gives off the impression that does nothing for combat power, you know, just because they call it bonds, but nothing can be further from the truth. For every bond level a Nikke levels up, they get a flat increase of HP, defense, and attack. Although the amount may vary, but they sit around the range of 600 health, 30 attack, and 5 defense. It could be more, it could be slightly less, but it should be around there. Assuming each level pessimistically give you only 600 HP and 30 attack and 5 defense, at rank 30, assuming you also limit break this character with until 3 stars, that would be a whopping 18,000 HP, 900 attack, and 150 defense. Definitely not something that you want to sleep on. You should focus on doing this for the 5 units which you use the most when picking on who to bond first. The best way to do it is to make sure you use all your advice attempts every single day and pick the option that yields 100 bond rather than the 51 if you're trying to min-max it. And if you're not, honestly, just use it. Just advise them. If you'd like to know more on what options to pick for every single character in the advice section in order to yield 100 bond, stay tuned for the next video. And that's a wrap. That's a freaking wrap, right, for this advanced team guide video. I know it's a lot to digest and I recommend that you take your time. One last thing I want to mention is that although the guide and tip for each stage of the game is very different, you should always continue to maintain what you have been doing in the earlier game. For example, if you're a late gamer, make sure you're still practicing what you're doing for early game and mid game so that you don't get stunted. If not, you probably get stuck along the way again. Same old. I hope this video was helpful and hopefully it's not too long this time or there's not too much information for you to digest. If you have any questions you'd like to ask, please feel free to leave them in the comment section below or just find me on Discord. Until the next video, I'll see you guys again soon. Bye.